Hey
Are we ready?
everyone! We're live. Yeah, so welcome to today's episode of K6 Office Hours. My name is Marie. I'm one of the dev roles here at K6. And I
And
yeah.
I am Leandro, also known as Señor Performo. Happy to be back here on another instance of office hours.
Nice. So we have a lot of things to talk about today, and I think it's going to be an interesting one because it's about, agile performance testing. It's about how can K6 be used to, shift your performance testing, and can it also be used to do continuous testing? So there's going to be a lot of topics today. But before that, we just want to share like a few announcements like from our side. Um,
Yay.
yeah,
Ads
so
time.
we're hiring, so we need someone. We're looking for a Go engineer as part of our K6 Chaos team who has focus on the community side. So if you know someone who's looking for a new challenge, then we'll add the link to the chat. But yes, we are looking for new engineer, and this is gonna be working with the XK6 disruptor extension. And then from our K6 champion side, um, here you go. I'm just gonna show my fancy. Um,
Ooh, let's get a close up on that.
so if the champions are gonna watch this, yeah, just let you know
Sorry.
we are testing the swag that we're gonna plan to send out for you. But yeah, from a champions announcement, we do have a couple of things to announce. So our champion Jose Luis, so he's actually speaking at .NET Days this coming 20 to 22nd of April. And he's going to be talking about how to break your REST APIs to make them stronger. So if you're interested to know more about this talk, again, we'll share the links. But yeah, it sounds like it's gonna be an interesting talk because it's about breaking your APIs to see if it can be stronger. Um,
Congratulations to Jose Luis. I have heard a little bit of what type of APIs and how he has broken them. It's going to be
yeah,
really entertaining.
yeah. Next announcement. So, we have a performance testing workshop that one of our K6 champion, Yanis. So he's actually going to be doing the workshop with K6 and TypeScript. So this is virtual. So if any of you are interested, again, I'll share the links to the chat. But yeah, this is free, and if you're available, just join this meetup group. Leandro, you will be there as well for the first few minutes just to give like an intro. And yeah, I think this is going to be a great hands-on workshop. So come prepared. Make sure you have K6, added into your machine. And Yanis will walk you through a lot of the different hands-on exercises. And then finally, again, from our K6 champion, Yanis, he's written this blog post on how to integrate K6 with influx data. So if you're interested, yeah, on how this works, he's written a quite comprehensive step by step on how to do it with some examples as well. So I'll share the links if any of you will be interested to hear about this. Yeah. So I guess yeah. I'm just gonna start the conversation because with like for example nowadays there's this um focus now on being agile, like it's really different from how it was before. So I guess Leandro, from your perspective, how do you think the agile approach, the agile change of working, how has it changed the way that we do performance testing?
I mean, only speaking about Agile, it has modified a lot the way in which we should be thinking about performance testing, because in the past we had these waterfall releases, right? And our software would arrive into production once a year, twice a year. Some wild organizations would do it every quarter, but that was it. And with that, we had to assure the performance of our application, not only to make sure that it was performing, but it had the capacity that it could take the load. Not getting into technological changes, because that brought up a plethora of other changes in perspective, but just about Agile, having to work continuously, having our software in production, and continuously releasing it into it, has changed a lot the perspective on how we did performance in the past, because we used to focus so much, and even some, you may already hear me like a broken record with performance is not the same as load testing, but these generated this misconception because we had this just single small opportunity to release the software into production, and we had to test for everything performance included, and at many times especially load. So that's why maybe was this misconception, this confusion around the industry. But this is because of waterfall. Now Agile brings this difference that it's okay, our software is already in production, is being used, we have the MVP, we are supposedly just bringing small changes and releasing them continuously into production. I'm not going to go into the rabbit hole of if you are not releasing continuously into production, you may not be agile. That's another conversation. But the situation that you already have the software in production, and probably you know that it survives the load, a traditional production load and activity, you need to change your perspective on just trying to I used to call them BLTs, BALT,
Mhm.
BALTs, big ass load tests,
Yeah.
where it's
Like like the sandwich BLT.
uh, it was a sandwich of uh, the situation there was we were trying to bring down the system. Load testing and performance testing meant capacity testing, like pushing
Mm,
it to the limits.
yeah.
We don't have to do that much anymore with Agile because it's in production already. We should know what is the performance of the application in production, and we're just releasing little things here and there. That changes everything on how we approach more often performance. We don't even have the time sprint by sprint to be
Mhm.
doing these bolts, because they used to take 3 weeks, 2 weeks. Some of them, just the execution, would take several days. Those were big events, big phases in our waterfall projects. Nowadays, agile sprints continues. We don't have time for that.
Mhm.
I would argue we never did, but it's not efficient, and it's not the way to deal with things. Especially since I mentioned the software is already in production, and you are adding little things at a time. That's the biggest.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned that, like people just think that performance testing is just about load, but it's really not, and that perhaps created this whole stigma that we can only do it in production, we can only do it like end to end, where we're gonna push the limits, but like we can also do like simple things like, oh, can we check the website performance in terms of like what the user sees, so that doesn't have to wait until everything is in production, because we can test that earlier on. And it really has given this sort of like importance on the two sides of performance testing, that hey, it's not just about load, browser performance is also equally as important, and we should also be checking that.
It's as well, and it's a story that I often tell when I was in the waterfall days, working in a project, and generally performance on waterfall was one of the last activities that you would do just
Mm.
before releasing into production, hoping that everything would go well, which almost never did.
Just keep
And
test.
yeah, no, and it was wild because on one hand you had all the other phases eating all your time for performance testing, you were assigned probably a month or 3 weeks, as I said. Oh, we only had 3 days now. If we were lucky, at other times we had to overlap with other testing phases, which, because performance equaled on those days load testing and capacity testing, we could not coexist with those other testing phases because we may slow down the system, bring it down, make all sorts of mayhem that would affect the other teams. And in this story that I generally experienced arriving here, all of these testing processes, functional integration, UAT, you name it, are supposed to be already finished. Often they were, sometimes they weren't. I would start automating for the processes that were in the scope, what we were supposed to run, and just clicking on it or recording the process, the steps for the process. I would notice that it was at times a little slow.
Mhm.
Many others, it was incredibly slow, ridiculously slow, at a point that I was like, how is it that no one else in the other testing phases
Have,
identified this,
yeah,
reported this?
yeah. Or
And that's
maybe
a,
they have.
say again?
Maybe they have, but they just didn't, like they think that, oh, that will be tackled right at the end, because that's, yeah,
That's
that
a
was,
good example because
yeah.
I saw in some projects that a few were trying to report it. No, 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 that's for performance. Don't worry about that. Let's just tackle what we're working on right now. I'm like, well, hey, he's telling this. I'm the performance. This is important to know at this point. And the outcome of that was that the focus on automating for load test and pushing the system to its limits, there was already that single process. Maybe many times were not a single process. There were more than one. That, what is the point? And I'm gonna give one of my car examples of racing the car, your system, pushing it to the limits, seeing how fast it can go. If you already know a tire is flat and probably one of the fuses is broken, there's no point. We're wasting time. This could have been fixed. This could have been identified earlier.
Mhm.
We could have left a little bit of these identifications. And it's interesting, and that's another point that I'm trying to make. Agile is forcing us to shift left and to think ahead of time and start taking. And we're doing these steps because we're forced to, because otherwise you won't be able to fix your performance tests in an sprint by sprint agile project if you are doing it the old ways. But we could have done that in the waterfall days. Just
As
many
well.
people didn't think of it because it was phases, we had time, and yeah, it's a problem of the performers. Let's keep pushing, right?
Thank
So all
goodness.
sorts of changes.
I wanted to ask you now, because obviously you've been doing performance testing for quite a long time. So I've actually been reading Mabl's report around this testing in DevOps 2022. So let's share that as well to the chat, and let me just share my screen. So I'm not gonna go through any of the sections, but I really encourage everyone just to have a look at this article, because it really opens your eyes as to what are, the current state, what are
Could
the
you just
different.
zoom in a little bit to make the
Yeah.
graph larger?
Oh, sorry.
Some of the texts are a little bit hard
Is
to
that
see. Yay. Let
yeah,
me even, yeah.
nice. Yeah. So if you haven't had the chance to look at this, like it's a really great resource, because you can also see like what other companies, like what are their obstacles when it comes to, testing or like software development in general. And the area that I want to sort of highlight is this performance testing effectiveness side, because um, interestingly, like only 6% have stated that, yeah, their performance testing practices is, best in class. So I'm guessing these are the companies where they're doing shift left testing. When it comes to performance, they're also doing shift right. And this whole approach where they are just continuously improving the application's performance by making sure that they have all the relevant performance checks. And then 22% said that, yep, it's great. And then 44% said like it's good. So most of the majority are still on this side. And then 29% of respondents said that, yeah, we definitely still need to improve our performance testing efforts. So I guess my question is, how can companies, or how can, teams, um I know this is gonna be probably a different like blog post on its own, but like, do you have any tips on how, we can maybe improve these numbers, or how can we be better educated around, like, performance testing in general?
Well, it's very interesting that what you're showing, just doing a quick math, is about 70% of the people that were interviewed were not like particularly happy, were like needs improvement, or
Mm,
it's good, okay, not great. And it's a huge proportion that say don't feel like, yay, we're doing awesome.
mm,
And there are so many things here. One that I have been repeating today so far a little bit is that there are so many misconceptions around performance testing, around how can you test it. I have a another rant with performance, where we are not just quality testing in other areas of QA. We are assuring quality assurance. And the focus here on performance is not to assure it, to preventively make sure that the performance is coming out well. We are testing it. It's kind of
mhm,
like a reactive reaction to bad performance. And even from the naming, we
mhm,
have kind of like a starting point misconception. We should be thinking and stepping ahead on how to find out that there are performance problems as early as possible, to mitigate them, to keep them healthy, performing. And that is very different from just testing it, performance testing, running the tests just before releasing it to production, just before, or let's say after all the code has been generated, everything has been packed, compiled, put on the pipeline, ready to, or even at times arrived at production, and we don't even know. Many organizations, sadly, if you, this was something as well that I experienced often in the industry. um, I would arrive at a project, at a customer, and ask like, okay, I'm going to do some load testing on your systems. I need to know what is your current performance and what is the use of your system. How many clicks are happening here, happening there? What are the responses? And they were like, aren't
no,
you coming to do that?
yeah,
And I'm like, what? Wait, you don't have any idea of what is the performance of your system? How
yeah,
fast is it responding? And they were looking at each other like, wait, aren't you doing that? I'm
yeah,
like, I could help you, but my assignment is to come and load test and try to bring down your system. And
mm,
and and that disconnection as well, many teams and organizations, I would say, first of all, make sure that you have devices, automations in place. We're going to talk a little bit on those new different ways on how to do it. Observability, to have all the things that can help you to identify as early as possible if you have a performance issue on any code that you are planning or working on or introducing into production,
mhm,
or code that is already in production. Identify that there's this problem anywhere in your environment. And that's another thing that I could give a recommendation. Many people, when they think of testing performance, observability, instrumentation, all these type of cool things that we can do, think of it to be placed in pre-prod, the environment, or just in production, or just in some key environments. I would recommend have those type of things everywhere. Make sure, and let me keep some dramatism, everywhere. Make sure it's everywhere
oh,
at
that's so,
every time. So because it's super important that
yeah,
we identify, we know the Thorpe that it's the earliest you catch a bug, a defect, or a problem, it's going to be cheapest, easiest to fix, blah 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 blah. Let's take advantage of that at the earliest possible time. Measure when we have a when why we have a problem, and start working into it and not let it move further down the line. And if it moves further, keep identifying as it moves through your pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
How is it doing? That's, I think, would be a key recommendation. And for stop focusing or obsessing a lot about capacity tests. Make sure that, because capacity test is not performance testing, it's another flavor of
Peak.
load testing, a sub category of performance testing, and everyone has been obsessing about that for a while. And again, we don't need to test for that because it's already in production. We already know it's surviving, unless you have something big coming up, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Black
Like
Fridays, of
data.
course, or this weekend, right? Super Bowl weekend. There are
Mm,
going to be lots of companies promoting um, for a new product, a new, um, let's say, sale series, whatever.
yeah.
There, you may want to do those big as low tests, but for everything else, because this is not agile development, you have a product release. That's a separate topic that you should test separately in a different fashion. Integrating in agile your performance testing doesn't have to focus that much on continue on capacity tests, big
Yeah.
as low tests.
I'd like to add as well, because like maybe some teams are, leaving it right at the end because they think that when it comes to performance testing, they have to collectively test like all the components together. But actually, when you're part of, let's say you're responsible for a specific API, you can test the performance of that API like as early as, development. And it doesn't have to be integrated, because that way, when it comes to discussing with the team, oh, actually, it can't really handle this amount of requests. So at least you're having those conversations early rather than having it integrated with other services, and then you're noticing it quite late that there are, performance issues. So like performance testing can also be done in like component type of way, where it doesn't have to be fully integrated yet with other, services or like other clients.
Yeah, it's crucial that you start to identify some of these things where, and to give you another tip. And even yesterday, I had a discussion, internal discussion here at K6. When would be a good moment to establish thresholds? In those traditional projects where we were doing load tests and pushing the system, and we were finding out the thresholds because, and this is another one, never ever go for like Lord of the Rings, one ring to rule them all, one threshold to rule them all. No, we will have different thresholds at different situations, processes. Um, you may have an API that processes an image and it's perfectly fine that it takes 10 seconds. You may have an API that just gives you the date that should be on milliseconds if it
Mm,
has a good performance. So, and defining some of those earlier, identifying like, okay, hey team, we're creating this. It's going to be complex. It's going to have AI. It's going to answer very complex questions, all the questions, generate images. What would be an acceptable response time for this, and threshold and SLO, so the team can or analyze or give some feedback at the earliest. And that's super important because it's not like, yeah, everything should be under 2 seconds.
yeah, just a random number.
I mean, I know it's all the craze right now, but it would be unfair to ask ChatGPT to be answering in under 2 seconds, given the complexity of what it is doing, right?
Yeah, it's all context dependent. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. And
it's
that's important.
it ties in as well, because like yesterday when I was doing automation guild, someone also asked like if they are just starting with, performance testing, how do they define the requirements? And then one of the things that I mentioned was, yeah, if they have existing like SLAs or like service level like objectives, they can use that as a basis. But also like it's also good to look at what your competitors response times are, because the goal for you is that, yeah, you should be like, in order for you to compete with like, the market, like you should be as fast or even like faster, like if that is your end goal to your competitors. So I, also suggested that, yeah, you can have a look at, maybe testing the responsiveness of your competitor website and then use that as an inspiration to basically aim that, oh, this is what we want to aspire in terms of our performance like metrics too.
Yeah, totally. It's a big bag of defining these thresholds. And as I said, the at the earliest, if you have some benchmarks, good, but
Mhm.
don't obsess with the benchmarks. You may be having some small difference. You may even be faster than your benchmark, and your performance threshold may be even lower than the benchmark if you can do it.
Mhm.
And that's something is like self-discovery. You go to the mountain and speak to yourself, what is my performance, what should I achieve or
What's
aim
my
for,
limits? Yeah.
and get together the team. Because when you have not created any line of code and say we're going to create let's say again an API that will give you the time, what is okay team, everyone, what do you think is a good response time, what should we create as a threshold? You don't know for sure yet what is going to be good, acceptable according to your context, but there you start to define like you haven't created any code, any automation, but you already have like a good threshold, like this new thing that we're going to push on the sprint shouldn't be that slower than. And
Mm-hmm.
then you start working on past metrics, maybe it's already in production, okay, should not deviate from here or there. So it's introspection time there.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna move on because I also found this article from X-Ray. So it's written by my good friend Giri Dar, and one of the trends that he mentioned, for this year is continuous testing for non-functional tests. And I figured because our topic today will also include shift left and continuous testing, it would be good to discuss this as well. So I think this is a really great point because not just with performance but with other requirements like accessibility, like even security. We're starting to have more focus on, oh, maybe we should try and test for that continuously and get the feedback that we have from our users and incorporate it like at the start, like during the development stage, and then just continuously improve our testing like stages. But yeah, it's just really great to see that other people, other companies are also seeing this as a trend.
It's interesting as well because I may not draw a line specifically, but point out some differences between enabling continuous testing, that being able to have QA processes on agile projects. Because an agile methodology may have the outcome maybe that you become continuous, you are able to release. It's a little bit like saying I'm gonna become, instead of a bakery, I'm gonna specialize on desserts. But specializing on desserts may give you the capacity to do cakes, which would be continuous. And putting them on the same, let's say, category as at the same things, it's kind of a blurry line that will make you like, yeah, am I ended up with the capacity to build cakes, but I became a bakery. So it's a little bit like those lines where shifting left may help you with some different approaches and implementations into enabling continuous testing in your platform. And this
Mm-hmm.
continuous testing, don't think it as just when your pipeline is pushing things towards production. Just before passing, it will be continuously tested. You can have continuous testing in QA, in pre-prod, in different environments, in different ways. Some even say some of these automated unit tests that happen inside of your software development kits are continuous testing because they are running. Even if I was impressed the very first time that I saw it, you are typing code and the unit tests are running in the backend just telling you, hey, you just broke it.
Mm.
Oh, cool. And that's continuous testing.
Yeah, and I
And
guess
stop calling them non-functional. Sorry, I hate that.
I was gonna like my next question. Well, not next question, but the next topic that I want to talk about is this whole thing about do we still call them non-functional? Because like maybe that is creating this whole separation or this whole sort of view that let's test the functional like requirements first because these are important, but like it's just leading to that view that maybe non-functional aren't as important, but it's actually more important if anything, because if it's working fine, but then if it's slow, or if it's just not really responding in a way that your users expect, then your efforts to make it work functionally, it's not going to be as good. So what should be the term that we should all be using?
Oh, I mean, we have performance tests, and we already have a term. It's like an I think this term may have been promoted from teams focused on functional testing and calling everybody else. It's
None.
just everybody else. That's a term, and arguably, the way it is called a non-functional test, I think it could be because when I was giving you the example of my earlier projects, hey, I'm in a project, I come functional testing past, and they did not report this problem. That I don't understand how they consider this button functional if it's taking 10 seconds to respond. The user may leave, or even, I mean, I'm giving like a mild example, 10 seconds, you may be willing to wait, may not interfere with your work. But to give you another example, we had a situation when you had checkboxes and you had to select quite a few to submit a process. Each time that you selected a checkbox, the response time was a second. And everyone was like, yeah, sure, a second, good performance, no problem. Yeah, but you had to select 50 checkboxes. It was a minute lost
uh,
checking boxes. That was not functional. You may argue, yeah, but that's performance, but wasn't allowing the system to function properly. So
mm,
that's where I I don't like to have the category because it gives like sounds a little bit like the cool kids in functional and all the other
like the
non-functional.
different, yeah, like the different clicks.
And I'm not saying we are cooler because we're performance. Every part of the team is important, cool, or whatever you want to evaluate. So I think it would be good to, because it also, like having that non at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
kind of, I feel psychologically makes you like dismiss them. Like non something, I don't care about that. And that's why also maybe why we have so many organizations not paying attention to security and penetration testing, some integration, some others that are considered non-functional, and just because of that harmful label, um, are misrepresented or underrepresented in our QA efforts.
Yeah. Speaking of like other improvements that we should maybe start doing, because um like obviously the shift left like term is just like really popular now. More and more teams, like developers, testers are starting to see the importance of it, but like there are also drawbacks in terms of just doing shift left, and not really thinking about the whole wider picture. So from your perspective, like can you think of any, I guess, drawbacks on shift left when it comes to the organization or like team processes?
So that's a very good point because I had this argument with a friend a while ago, and he mentioned I'm against this shift something wording, and I was like, "What? What do you mean?" And he's like, stating it as shift means that you are moving it,
Mm-hmm.
and I would agree. Like, yeah, we are still testing in the middle. We should be still testing in the middle, not only left, not only right.
Right, yeah.
And we were like toying, like I came up. So shall we call it spread left, spread right? because we still should be covering the whole left, right, middle, up, down specter or scope of our projects.
Mm-hmm.
I think just think that some organizations may be falling in wrongdoings or not the best practice just by focusing, okay, we're not going to be doing anything else but shift left and everything goes to the left, start working as early as possible, blah, blah, blah. Has advantages, but I guarantee there are going to be some gaps that you will get lost. One advantage there is that it's kind of tough if you are doing shift left right. I mean, word game. If you're doing shift left correctly in an adequate manner, you may get benefits that will permeate to the center, to the right testing side of things, and to other tiers. Some of those best practices where you have the automations, have the test, have the observability, from the beginning, from day one, the tests are running continuously automatically. Some of these best practices, those are inherited into the middle part of the testing life cycle of the project. And to the right, once you're in production, so many of those things end up in production being able to be executed. So it's interesting because I do agree, and it was a very good point from this friend. I just can't remember who I was discussing that with, but it's stuck. Spread them, spread the test efforts to the left, to the right, because you shouldn't be focusing only on shift left.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's kind of tough to just do that. And it would be silly to not to take advantage of everything that you generated
Yeah.
early with your shift left approach, spread
Then
left approach.
then shouldn't it just be like plain continuous testing? Because like from what you've mentioned, like the first model that popped to my mind was Dan Ashby's continuous testing model, where he basically said that, yeah, we can test here, we can test here, we can test here, we can test here. So there's like different areas that we can test, not just things on the right, not just things on the left. So it's just all continuously. So maybe, yeah, we should just be putting more emphasis on the continuous testing part rather than saying shift left or shift right or other new terms.
It's interesting to my perspective, right? Also very personal and non-respectable, is with the example that I was giving you, I don't think that you can achieve continuous testing without thinking about it early. You need to do early efforts, early actions,
Early conversation.
definitions to achieve continuous. Is that's why I was giving the example with the bakery. Um, you may be able to bake cakes in your kitchen, but you won't be able to produce cakes often if you don't like turn your shop into a bakery. It's something that goes hand in hand. Both are kind of side effects of the other, but a key for continuous to achieving continuous QA, in my opinion, is to have an effective shift left strategy, because many of the continuous testing actions
It requires, yeah.
you to be shifted, spread left.
Yeah. And I guess as well, like this is where automation plays like a really important part, because for you to be able to test continuously, for you to be able to, start checking for different performance requirements, it's very crucial that, performance checks, they need to be added as part of your CI and CD pipeline. So, what I want to sort of focus on the next, like, few minutes now is how is it like, so for example, like in today's world, like we've got obviously K6. Um, how are the performance testing tools nowadays? How are they helping us in terms of achieving, these like automated performance tests? Because looking back at the testing in DevOps report again, it's mentioned here that, yeah, almost a third of respondents were interested in automating performance testing. So there is the like the appetite for that. So can you just give like some few I guess examples on how performance testing tools nowadays, such as K6, have been helping with this shift left performance and continuous testing performance approach?
So the first difference that I can think of is on the tools themselves. In the past, for waterfall, for these big projects, um, the tool was on one hand accessible only by the chosen ones. I generally joke that was the sword in the rock that only the chosen one could lift and wear and will them to performance test here and there because of licensing, because of knowledge, because of many situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, one key characteristic is that everyone in the team should be able to at least do something with the tool. I mean, I'm not saying everyone needs to be an expert on performance automation, but at the very least, um, have access. Be able to, if anything, the whole team is hit by that damn boss that is sometime gonna hit us all. Uh, if it happens to the whole team and only one person remains the product owner, can the product owner access this? To not to need a license, special knowledge, or super advanced skills, or that's one that
Mm-hmm.
these tools are accessible, right? And another one that I remember in my old days with the old tools that we were using, I remember the first installer would fit in a CD, uh, a few hundreds of megabytes,
Mm-hmm.
and it was you put the CD, run the installer, wait for a bit or at times a while, and then you are ready to use. Start the tool, and it's booting, it's popping up a lot of GUIs and stuff. And that was at the very beginning. The last times that I was physically working with those installers were, here's your DVD, gigs of space that the installer, and at the same time, the process, the tool was heavy. You needed minimum hardware requirements to be able to just launch it, not to run tests, not to do like the heavy lifting stuff. No, no, just
Just running, yeah.
open it.
Yeah.
And those things in modern tools today, why this type of situations happened in the past is because these tools had to support a plethora of protocols, things, have everything in one big waterfall mindset. Even when you could already install them in a server and work with them in the cloud or something like that, it was still bulky, heavy, and not that efficient. Nowadays, that's another element. Anyone should be able to, again, get access to the tool, which implies getting it nice
Mm-hmm.
and quickly. I'm going to do a quick segue here. I published not long ago a video. Take a look on our YouTube channel on how easy and fast it is to install K6 on a Windows and a Mac. It's super straightforward. I named the video under a minute. I mean, it takes under a minute on each system. The video is a little bit longer, but we are showing several systems. It took seconds. And that's key, that all the team can get the tool, start working with it in seconds. It's light, it's efficient. And for Agile as well, these modern tools have to be really easy to be integrated in your pipelines. If they are these huge, bulky processes that, I mean, as I told you, just to open the tool, it took several seconds and you needed lots of hardware requirements. Imagine putting that inside of a pipeline that has to be snappy, quick, and push into production as fast and often as possible. Those big tools do not fit that well anymore. So that's one where modern tools such as K6 is way better. Someone, I see a question in the chat
Yeah.
amongst Gatling. I believe the first difference that comes to mind is Gatling uses Scala for creating your automations. It's a language that I'm not that familiar with. I remember I managed to pull a script here and there with it. Programming languages, when you understand one, most of the rest are approachable. But K6 uses JavaScript, in my opinion, a little bit more universal. I had less trouble picking it up than Scala with Gatling, but they are doable. And another difference is that K6 modifies or translates the JavaScript script that you just generated into Go. And Go is light, fast, efficient, so you may be able to generate even more load and easier and more efficiently in general in your pipelines than in Gatling. There's another, we need to update it a little bit, article we have in K6 comparing these tools in several metrics, in how much memory they take, how programmatic or how easy are they to integrate. Take a look at that, comparing open source load testing tools in the K6 blogs. Again, it's kind of like an old blog post, but will give you an idea of what are those key differences among each one of the tools. And it's very thorough. You will get to the point where you will be able to see which one consumes more RAM, which one is more accurate at reporting true response times, all sorts of things that you will find. I highly recommend that article. I love it.
Yeah, I've just shared that article as well. So Mary, yeah, if you're interested to have a look, then yeah, just head over to that link. Like Leandro said, I think this was published like 2020, but I think this is still very like relevant in terms of the different comparison. Um,
Mhm.
I guess another thing that comes to my mind is, even though there's some differences, like in terms of the similarity, like I think both tools want to solve, the same problem. They're both open source. Like they both write the performance test as code, which is, I guess, it's like crucial in terms of like having it integrated as part of, your CI/CD pipeline. I haven't used Gatling much, but like say for example for K6, like we're also trying to expand to also cover other types of testing as well. So like our overall sort of like view in the future is to not just do load testing, but like also do other types of testing, like whether it's browser testing, chaos testing, or just like end-to-end testing, or even contract testing. So we're trying to have that, I guess, holistic view on like the different types of tests that we can also do. Nice. In terms of like, because I actually received this question yesterday, as part of the automation guild. So what would be your advice? So, because if people are using, tools, so whether that's K6 or Gatling, they do have the script. And for software testers, for like QA engineers who's not very confident with their programming skills, how can they still use these modern tools to try and, I guess, help their team to start performance testing efforts as earlier on?
Well, I think a first approach, uh, get working on programming. That's going to be a skill for the future that I think even like lawyers may start to have to be able to deal into it, especially ChatGPT coming into the picture and lawyering stuff. And I mean, this is extending all over the place. I know that's not the recommendation that you were looking for, but I highly recommend getting a little bit on programming and polish those skills. Or there's information everywhere to start playing around and getting a little bit understanding around it. But fortunately, we have some tools that may aid us on these efforts. One very common process that we used to do in the early days, and I'm going to mention why it's not that practical anymore, or the best approach that you could take, was to grab the application, do the steps that you wanted to simulate, record those steps, and port them into your automation tool. In K6, we have the HAR to K6 converter. You
Yeah.
can click on your browser, open your developer tools window, bring or record all the actions that you were taking, export that into a HAR file, HAR, if you want to look for those files. And you can run it in a in the hard converter and end up with a somewhat functioning K6 script. Here, there are some challenges because doing it this way, you will find some authentication, session variables, and things that you have to figure out and update in your code. This is called correlation, where you have to catch this variable from a response from the server and use it everywhere else where you need it to keep working, or making the server think that it's talking to a real browser or a real human being. And another one that is a good initial step to start automating a little bit with K6. I like XK6 browser because it makes it a little bit more straightforward if you are not used to protocols and um, backend communication.
Yeah.
You will see button dot click. You will see some things that are kind of easier to understand if you don't have a programming
Yeah.
mindset. But start playing with K6. I mean, and that's the point where I was getting at. Modern applications should not be, at least for load testing, automated anymore with front end recordings, because modern applications are service based. Many of those are based on microservices. And a single application nowadays generally doesn't live in the same box anymore. We don't have boxes, we have the cloud, we have instances. So the service this button that you're clicking, uh, maybe calling or triggering, may not be even near your application, and you maybe just now you have to focus only on that API or service request, which makes them a little bit more modular.
Yeah.
So try to do an API request with K6. I mean, I may be a little bit subjective and biased because I know some programming, but it's very straightforward. You just HTTP rec, call it, put the URL, send some parameters if you need it, and you're all set. So there are many ways where you can approach it if you are not familiar with coding. And the
Yeah.
best, you don't need any tool to code it. Any text editor, anywhere you are, start writing something.
I guess we also have that like if a team also has an existing, Postman collection for their API tests, and they want to like just reuse like a couple of those tests and then convert it into a load test. We have the Postman to K6
Mm-hmm.
converter as well. And at the same time, like apart from the hard converter that you mentioned, we also have the browser recorder extension. So, like, if your team is responsible for, testing a particular page, and you're not maybe, I guess, too confident with your programming skills, I think the browser recorder is a great way to start as well, because you can just record the specific user journey, and then it will then be converted to like a script, to a JavaScript,
I, I forgot to mention as well, in K6 Cloud, in the platform, we have a codeless alternative. I I mean, usually the one that knows development is a little bit against codeless, but I highly recommend it if you have not been able to get up with your development skills. This is very visual, very easy as well for you to start pulling up some automations. So, I mean, you have several alternatives there. There's
Yeah.
no excuse.
Because like on my previous role, so I was part of a team as well where we were responsible for like multiple APIs, multiple services, and we actually introduced K6, and the developers in my team, they were quite new to using K6. We were using Python for our project, but then we were also using like JavaScript for some, so it just made sense for us to introduce K6. And I guess from a developer perspective, like it is quite easy, but as well from, a tester perspective, like you can always try pairing with your developers to further improve your programming language. Because um, as it's as its best, like you just need to use like plain vanilla JavaScript. You don't need like advanced, I guess, JavaScript knowledge. It's just really like the basic JS skills. So from that perspective, if you're really, I guess, if you're really not confident, try and pair with someone else, so that both of you can try and write the script together. That worked
And
for us.
that's an awesome recommendation as well. Like, get together with a developer. You'll be killing several birds with the same stone, because not only no birds were hurt in this example, uh, but when you get close to a developer as well, you will be closing a little bit that gap where the developer may be aware of what you're trying to do, and now that responsibility will be a little bit shared. You will be shifting left as well, because you're involving the developer. You're spreading a little bit earlier in the process everything. I love that recommendation, because by
Yeah.
following it, you're involving someone else in the team on.
And you're also spreading your knowledge about testing, because like our developers, like I 100% agree that they should be writing the automated tests, they should be helping out in writing the other testing efforts. But with your guidance, they can definitely have more, I guess, better knowledge on what are the recommended practices, or which type of testing we should really look out in terms of when we're developing our code. So it's just really that collaboration. There's this comment as well from by Vav. So he said that, yep, Scott Moore actually refers to non-functional requirements as operational requirements. So that could be an alternative to non.
I would say, how about we just call them requirements?
Yeah, make it simpler.
Yeah, I mean, the when you start to draw those lines, you generate, like, by accident, mostly psychological biases.
Mhm.
That is whoever is operational, and we should be caring about as a team for all those requirements, for everything that the system is functional, performant, safe, secure,
Excellent.
resilient. All these things that we have to take care of are requirements. Just keep them as requirements. I wouldn't say to keep classifying them, otherwise you will walk into those blurry lines where things get weird.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And I guess it also helps out, not just the testers and developers, but even like your product owners. Like there's no requirement that's like, I guess, like superior than the other. They are all equally, important.
I think a good example of list of requirements, whatever the type they are, when you get a new like software requirement, or your little task in your post-its for your Kanban board, uh, develop this code that this does this. And generally, with the requirements, is like a little bit TDD thinking here, that it should return this, it should do that, it should blah blah blah, fail on this situation, blah blah blah, responding under a given period of time. Do not use more than this amount of resources. Do not connect that much on the database. Bandwidth on the network. All the principal things that should be there as a default in a new requirement for software. There are new requirements for these to be marked as done in your Kanban board. Otherwise, why moving it? I would add as well, should have an automation with it, should have unit testing, should have this, and that, so that you
Yeah.
can integrate it and that continuously keeps working.
Yeah. I love that. Awesome. Well, I think, yeah, we're almost gonna be out of time. But yeah, I hope all of you enjoyed our episode today. We really discussed a lot about agile performance, the state of performance testing at the moment, and how K6 can help with shift left and continuous testing.
Oh, and we have another announcement. Just a quick update. We won't be around next week. You'll have a break from us next week from office hours. We will. Our team will be busy, so you'll enjoy a break from us and see you the week after.
Yeah, definitely.
So don't
Awesome.
worry if you don't see us next week. Where are these guys? Or this guy.
Abandon us. Yeah, but yeah, we'll be back with another episode of the week after.
Yeah,
Cool.
stay tuned.
All right. Well, thank you everyone. Yeah, for tuning in.
Take care, everyone. Have a happy Friday, happy weekend. And if you're watching in the future, see you on the next episode.
All right. Bye bye. Thank you.
Adios. Ending.